Hello and welcome. In the previous videos, we've set up our inventory bar and we can add items to our inventory, but we need to set up how to swap items in C++. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to go to shootercharacter.cpp and we're going to check out the swap weapon function. So in swap weapon, we simply drop the current weapon and then equip the weapon to swap. Now we need to go ahead and take care of our inventory array before we actually do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our inventory and check its size first. So we're going to say if inventory dot num, that's the amount of number of elements in the inventory array, we're going to say the size of the array minus 1. We're going to check to see if that is greater than or equal to the equipped weapon's slot index. So we're going to say equipped weapon get slot index. Now we need to make sure that the inventory is large enough to accommodate for the slot index of the equipped weapon because we're going to be accessing that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our inventory and we're going to replace the slot that holds the currently equipped weapon with our weapon to swap. So we're going to say inventory indexed at the equipped weapon slot index. So we're going to say equipped weapon get slot index. We're going to set that equal to weapon to swap. Then after that, we'll drop the weapon and equip the new weapon. So whichever slot our equipped weapon was in, we first check to make sure that the inventory is large enough to accommodate for that index. Then we simply set the item in that inventory slot equal to weapon to swap. Now next we're going to add the ability to select items in the inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and compile this, and while this is compiling, we're going to look back at our inventory bar. So I'm going to hit play, and notice that we have the F key under our default weapon icon, and then we have numbers 1 through 5 under these inventory slots. And we'd like to add the ability to press these keys and bind functions to those keys. So let's go ahead and set this up. We'll go ahead and go to Edit and Project Settings. We'll go down to Inputs, and let's add some action mappings. Now I'm going to add a new action mapping, and I'm going to use the F key for this one. And I'm going to call this F key. And I'm going to click on this icon and hit the F key on the keyboard to select the F key. Next, I'll create another one, and I'm going to call this 1 key. And I'll select this icon and hit the 1 key. Let's go ahead and create one called 2 key and bind this to the 2 key. Let's make another one called 3 key and bind it to the 3 key. We'll make one called 4 key and bind this one to 4, and we'll make another one called 5 key and bind it to the 5 key. Okay, so that sets up our project settings. We can close that, and now let's go back into shootercharacter.h and create some protected functions. So I'll go up to the protected functions section, and we're going to add some callbacks for when these keys are pressed. They're all going to be void, and I'm just going to call the first one F key pressed. I'm going to make one called 1 key pressed, and we can't start off functions with numbers, so I'm going to spell out 1. I'll make one called 2 key pressed. I'll make another one called 3 key pressed, another called 4 key pressed, and another one called 5 key pressed. And I'll go ahead and create definitions for these and let Visual Studio create these function bodies. So there's the F key, here's the 1 key, and here is the 2 key, here's 3 key and 4 key, and finally 5 key. So now we have functions for these key presses, now we need to bind those actions in the setup player input component function. So let's go up to setup player input component, and I'm going to go ahead and take this bind action for the crouch action mapping and copy it. I'm going to paste it here and change the string to F key, and the function will be F key pressed. Now I'm going to copy this and then I'll paste it 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the next one will be the 1 key, and the function is 1 key pressed. The next one will be the 2 key, and the function is 2 key pressed. Next we have the 3 key, and this will be 3 key pressed. And next is 4 key, and that's 4 key pressed. And then finally 5 key, and this function is 5 key pressed. Now we must switch the weapons in these functions. So we'll create a function for switching these weapons. Let's go back to shooterCharacter.h and create a function called, it's going to be void, and we'll call it exchange inventory items. And this function is going to take a couple of int32s. It's going to take the indices for the items. So we'll have an int32 called current item index and an int32 called new item index. And this function is going to swap the items in the inventory. So let's go ahead and create a function body for that. And so let's go ahead and implement this. Now the first thing we need to do is make a couple of checks. So we're going to have an if statement. And first I want to check to see if the current item index is equal to the new item index, because that would mean we're trying to equip a weapon that's already equipped. So let's say if current item index is equal to new item index, then we can simply return. And we also want to return if the new item index is greater than or equal to the inventory size. So we're going to say new item index is greater than or equal to inventory.num, because that would mean we're trying to index out of the bounds of the array, and that would cause a crash. Now we're going to swap weapons here. So we're going to say auto old equipped weapon equals equipped weapon. We're going to store that in a temporary pointer variable. And we're going to also say auto new weapon. And this is going to be the weapon at the inventory index of new item index. So I'm going to cast this, since the array holds items and not weapons. I'm going to cast this to an A weapon. And what I'm casting is inventory indexed at new item index. This is the item that we're trying to swap to. We're trying to exchange. And this should say auto, so I'm missing an O there. Now what we're going to simply do is equip the weapon. We're going to say equip weapon with the new weapon. So the equipped weapon will now be the new weapon. And we'll simply say that old equipped weapon, this pointer to this old weapon, we're going to set its item state. And we're going to set the item state to e item state EIS picked up. So it's no longer going to be equipped anymore. And then we'll take our new weapon and we're going to set its item state to e item state, and this will be now equipped. So essentially we're storing these items in temporary values, and then we're calling equip weapon with the new item using the new item index, and then we're simply setting the item state for the old weapon to picked up and the new weapon to equipped. And now we'll call this function in the F key pressed function. So let's go to F key pressed, and we'll simply call exchange items. Now first we're going to make an if check to see if equipped weapon get slot index is equal to 0. Because if the equipped weapon's already in the 0 slot, then we don't need to exchange anything. So we're going to say return. Now, if we make it past that line, then the equipped weapon is not at slot 0. And so pressing the F key is going to cause us to switch to this weapon. That's the weapon in the default slot. So we'll simply call exchange inventory items, and we're going to get the equipped weapon and get its slot index, and we're going to exchange it with the 0 slot because that corresponds to the F key. Next, we'll go ahead and implement the 1 key pressed. And this is going to be similar. We're going to check to see if the equipped weapon's slot index is equal to 1 because that is what corresponds to the 1 key. So if we're pressing the 1 key and our equipped weapon is already at slot 1, then we're trying to switch with the weapon we're already equipping, so we don't need to do that. So if it's not equal to 1, then we'll call exchange inventory items. So I'll go ahead and copy this line here. And we're exchanging the equipped weapons slot index, and we're exchanging it with index 1. I'll go ahead and remove the blank space between these function calls. Now I'm going to copy these lines and use them for 2 key pressed, only we're checking it versus the 2 slot. So we can replace these 1s with 2s. And we'll do the same thing in 3 key pressed, only we'll replace the 2s with 3s. And we'll do the same thing in 4 key pressed, only it's going to be 4. And then of course 5 key pressed, it's going to be 5. Okay. Stay tuned, we're going to get to see the results of this very soon. See you in the next video.